The grand lecture hall at Harvard University buzzed with excitement. Today's guest lecture by Dr. Gregory Wallace, one of the most brilliant minds in theoretical physics, had drawn a crowd that filled every seat: students, professors, journalists, and visiting scholars. A sea of eyes stared at the polished wooden podium where Dr. Wallace was about to make a bold claim. He stood tall, his graying hair and sharp suit giving him the aura of authority. Turning to the massive chalkboard behind him, he drew a complex equation with quick, confident strokes. The room fell silent as everyone tried to process the labyrinth of symbols. "This," he declared, pointing to the equation, "is one of the great unsolved problems of modern physics. And I say to you today, with complete confidence, it cannot be solved, not with our current understanding of mathematics or physics." There were murmurs of agreement. Many nodded, some scribbled notes, while others sat wide-eyed, trying to grasp the complexity on the board. For decades, this equation had haunted the brightest minds in the world. Meanwhile, unnoticed in the very back of the room, sat a young boy, just 9 years old, his legs barely reaching the floor. He wore a worn-out sweater, clearly out of place in a room full of scholars and PhDs. His name was Ayan, and he wasn't a student at Harvard. He was simply waiting for his father, who worked as a janitor in the building. Today, he had insisted on tagging along, his notebook clutched tightly in hand. Dr. Wallace took a dramatic pause. "This problem is what we call mathematically impossible to solve using conventional logic. Any questions?" There was silence. Even the top students, normally eager to impress, didn't dare challenge the professor. And then, unexpectedly, a small hand rose in the back row. The room turned toward the boy. Dr. Wallace smiled, half amused. "Yes, young man, you have a question?" Ayan stood up nervously. "Can I try solving it?" A wave of laughter rippled across the room. Some chuckled kindly. Others looked irritated. One man whispered, "Who let a kid in here?" The professor chuckled. "Son, this isn't a riddle. It's advanced quantum mechanics." But Ayan didn't sit down. He simply repeated, "Can I try?" The laughter faded. Something about the boy's steady voice caught everyone off guard. Dr. Wallace studied him for a moment, then gestured toward the board. "All right," he said, humoring him. "Let's see what you've got." Ayan stepped forward, the room, watching in stunned silence. He took the chalk with tiny fingers and looked at the equation. The chalkboard towered over him, but he didn't seem intimidated. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then began to write. One line, then another. The lecture hall, once buzzing with brilliance, had never been so quiet. The lecture hall was frozen in time. Chalk tapped gently against the board as Ayan, the 9-year-old boy with oversized sleeves and oversized dreams, filled in the final lines of his solution. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer energy of thought coursing through him. He stepped back slowly, eyes scanning what he had written one last time. For a moment, no one moved. Dr. Wallace, the esteemed professor who had declared the problem unsolvable just minutes earlier, approached the board. He adjusted his glasses, leaning in to examine the solution. His eyes darted from line to line, his confident expression slowly melting into disbelief. This can't be right," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He looked again, double-checked. Every symbol, every derivation, it was right. He turned around speechless. "This solution is correct. In fact, it's not just correct, it's elegant. It approaches the problem from an angle I've never seen before." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras were raised, phones recorded. Some students stood up from their seats to get a better look. The same audience that had laughed moments earlier was now in awe. "Who taught you this?" Dr. Wallace asked, his voice filled with a mixture of amazement and humility. "My father," Ayan replied, softly. "He said I should always look at problems differently. He couldn't finish school, but he loves numbers. He used to clean classrooms here and read physics books he found in the bins. All eyes turned to the back, where a man in janitor's uniform stood frozen, his eyes wide and glistening. It was Ayan's father, Mr. Rahman, who had quietly swept these halls for years, never seeking attention, never asking for recognition. The hall erupted into applause, not just for Ayan, but for the man who had raised a genius while pushing a broom through the corridors of one of the world's most elite institutions. Dr. Wallace walked over to Mr. Rahman. "Sir," he said, extending a hand, "you've done something even I couldn't. You nurtured a mind that sees beyond boundaries." Tears welled in Mr. Rahman's eyes. "I just gave him love and a little chalk." Within days, Ayan's story went viral. News headlines read, "Harvard's youngest mind solves the impossible." Interviews flooded in. Scientific journals wanted to speak to him. Universities offered scholarships, but Ayan remained grounded, always saying, "My father is my greatest teacher." The equation once thought to be impossible had been cracked, not by a tenured professor, but by a child who had no seat in the classroom, only a heart full of wonder and a mind unclouded by limits. And so, in a hall built for the world's most brilliant, it was a boy from the shadows and his humble father who lit it up with the brightest light of all.